Okay, so let's unpack this. We are diving into something that happened back on December 4th, 2025 in the UK.
Yeah.
A major government announcement that on the surface sounds kind of procedural,
Right.
but the context around it, well, it points to a really profound, almost unprecedented moment of political panic.
Yeah, and we're not talking about a response to, a global crisis or some big necessary reform. The core fact here, the really striking thing, is that the governing Labor administration just canceled 4 major elections.
Scheduled for May 2026.
Exactly. They didn't just move the date a bit. They hit a giant pause button and said these elections, well, they're not happening for years.
So our mission today, looking at all the sources we have, polling firms, political correspondence, government briefings, is really to get into the massive disconnect between the official story and the messy, chaotic political reality that was revealed by polling data just a day earlier.
I mean, this is a story about numbers driving a decision that really touches the very integrity of democracy.
And the scope of this is huge.
Oh, it is. We need to be clear. This isn't some minor council reshuffle. These were brand new mayoral contests for huge, powerful regions. We're talking about Greater Essex, Norfolk, and Suffolk.
Hampshire and the Solent and Sussex and Brighton.
Right. And you add all that up, and you're talking about roughly 7.5 million voters
Right.
who just had their vote, well, yanked away from them.
7.5 million. That's the size of a small country. The scale alone just makes this story explosive.
So let's start with the hard context, the what and the when.
Okay, so these were brand new, very powerful roles. The government had actually legislated to create these new regional mayors as part of this ongoing, devolution policy.
So passing power down from London.
Exactly. And these offices, they come with real authority, significant budgets.
So we're not talking about ceremonial titles here. These are people who would control local transport, big housing projects.
Real fiscal power. Winning one of these is a serious prize.
And the campaigns were already running. Absolutely. That's the key detail. Campaigning was fully underway. Our sources confirm millions of pounds had already been spent. Candidates were selected. Parties were actively out there. This wasn't some future idea. It was a live event.
And the new date they pushed it to.
3.5 years into the future, it goes from May 2026 all the way to 2028.
Wow. That's a staggering delay to try and justify just on administrative grounds.
It is. Now, the official line, the legal hook they're using, is reorganization. They keep saying they need more time to legally define the boundaries and the powers for these new authorities.
But is that actually a thing? Can they just do that?
Well, the sources point to the Leveling Up and Regeneration Act.
Yeah.
It gives the Secretary of State some flexibility on the timing for setting up these new bodies, so they argue it's just administrative complexity. Technically, it is within their legal rights.
So on paper, it's legal, but the obvious question is, why now? Why wait until December 2025, just a few months out, to realize the paperwork is too much? And why announce it the day after the worst poll of the decade drops?
And that's it. That is where we switch from the technical justification to what the analysts, what our sources are calling the real why.
Numbers.
The polling numbers. This is where, administrative delay meets just raw political panic.
Okay, let's dive into these numbers because they're just astonishing. The National Snapshot, the Find Out Now poll from December 3rd, what did it say?
It was catastrophic for the government.
Right.
Just catastrophic. The poll had Labor on a mere 14%.
14.
Yeah.
For a sitting government, nationally, we should just pause on that for a second. What does a number like that even mean?
It signals a complete, unprecedented collapse of confidence. 14% puts a governing party in the territory of electoral irrelevance. Normally, it'd be in the 30s, maybe 40s.
Sure.
To fall to 14% means your support has just evaporated. It's an existential crisis for the party.
And the reason that 14% is the panic point is because of who's on the other side, specifically Reform UK, led by Nigel Farage. What were they polling at?
They were polling at 31%.
Wow.
And that's the critical bit. A 17-point national lead for Reform UK over the government. It means, for the first time in modern history, a populist movement has just eclipsed the major parties.
A 17-point lead is.
Yep.
It's not just a bad poll. It signals the whole political landscape is restructuring underneath your feet.
And that's the national picture, which is horrifying enough for them. But what really drove this cancellation decision was the local reality. The government saw that 17-point deficit and had to ask, what does this mean for 4 specific first-past-the-post elections?
And the regional data. The YouGov and electoral calculus polling for those 4 mayoral areas.
Yeah.
What did it tell them?
It told them their absolute worst fears were true. The finding was unanimous. Greater Essex, Norfolk, and Suffolk, Hampshire, Sussex, all of them.
What was it?
Reform UK was leading by double digits in every single one of the 4 areas.
Wow. So it wasn't even close.
Not at all. The sources say Labour was scraping the mid to high teens at best. Not just trailing Reform, but often fighting for third or even fourth place.
So let's connect that back to the power of these roles. Why was losing these 4 elections so catastrophic that you'd cancel democracy for 7.5 million people to avoid it?
Because of how you win.
Yeah.
These are first-past-the-post contests. Most votes wins, you don't need a majority.
Right.
And with the opposition vote so split between Labour, the Conservatives, the Lib Dems Reform polling in the 30s, was basically guaranteed to win all 4.
So the fear wasn't just losing. It was about handing Reform a massive institutional platform.
Precisely. The sources say the government was facing a complete wipeout, and the result would be 4 Reform mayors with real budgets, real power, for 4 years.
That's a nightmare scenario for a government.
Imagine it. 4 regional power bases run by your most aggressive opponent, Nigel Farage. It would give Reform a huge springboard, massive media visibility. It's a strategic disaster.
So the calculation was, better to postpone reality for 3 years than to hand your opponent that platform.
That's the calculation. But now we have to talk about the pattern, because this isn't a one-off. This isn't the first time they've used the reorganization card in these exact areas.
Right, that's what's so fascinating. The source material says this is the 2nd year in a row.
Second year running. Last year it was the council elections. Same areas, same pretext of administrative reorganization. And now, a year later, they've come back and done it again for the even bigger mayoral contests.
It just strips away all the credibility from the reorganization argument, doesn't it?
Completely. If you were really struggling with the bureaucracy, why would you set up 2 election cycles just to cancel them both? It doesn't add up.
And the timing is just, it's damning.
It's impossible to defend. The optics are terrible. The perception is you're doing this the moment you are 17 points behind and facing a historic humiliation. It just screams panic, not planning. No amount of legal jargon is going to distract 7.5 million people from the fact that their election was canceled because the government was terrified of the result.
So the goal, according to the sources, is pretty clear. They think they've bought themselves 3 years. 3 years to try and fix the polls, sort out the economy, and just hope that by 2028, this Reform UK surge has gone away.
That's the hope. But you have to ask, will it have the opposite effect? I mean, doesn't a party like Reform thrive on this kind of thing? On the narrative that the establishment is so scared they'll break the rules?
It seems like an incredible risk. Trading 4 future losses for this immediate, huge damage to public trust. Not to mention the ammunition you're handing the opposition.
And the backlash was immediate. And it was volcanically hostile.
Let's get into that, because the language people used was...
Yeah.
It was something else.
Well, the Conservatives, people like Kemi Badenoch, they immediately called it a subversion of democracy, which is, not a policy disagreement. That's an attack on the rules of the game itself.
And the Lib Dems.
They called it a blatant stitch-up. That phrase suggests a deliberate conspiracy, to rig the outcome.
But the biggest reaction, of course, had to come from the man himself.
Oh, absolutely. Nigel Farage, the next day, wasted no time. He just flat out called it electoral fraud.
And then he used that analogy, that very potent analogy.
The one designed to just hit a nerve with voters. He said, only dictators cancel elections when they're scared of losing.
And that comparison, it elevates this from just some administrative argument to a moral crisis.
It's strategically brilliant because it perfectly fits his narrative, the narrative that the political class will abandon the rules to protect themselves when they feel threatened. This postponement, it basically just proves his whole point for him.
What's really damaging is we even saw criticism from inside Labor's own ranks. The former devolution minister, Jim McMahon, is cited.
Yeah, and his quote was simple, but very pointed. He just said, we need to be better than this. And that little phrase, it just reveals this deep internal split. It suggests that even if it's technically legal, a lot of people in the party see it as a profound moral and political failure.
So what's the ultimate consequence here? Beyond just avoiding 4 losses in 2026, what have they actually created?
They've, ironically, handed Nigel Farage the biggest rocket fuel of his political life. They've confirmed his central message of establishment fear, and they've given him a concrete, undeniable example to show everyone.
Because now, 7.5 million people know exactly why their vote was taken away. The official reason might be paperwork, But the political reality, confirmed by the timing.
Is that the current leader is terrified of Nigel Farage and Reform UK. And that becomes the only story that matters. Canceling an election because you're at 14% doesn't stop your opponent. It just ensures the reason for the cancellation is the top story for the next 3 years.
This has been a fascinating and, to be honest, a pretty alarming deep dive. The core takeaway seems so clear. A legally defensible action was taken, but the timing, right after those abysmal polls, created this inescapable conclusion of pure panic.
Yeah. And that leads to a final, pretty provocative thought for you to consider. The government's plan was to buy time, to fix their image before 2028. But by stopping 7.5 million people from voting, did they just reinforce the very narrative of fear and weakness they wanted to avoid? What's the real cost when a party tries to postpone political reality?
When you try to hold back a wave, you often just create more turbulence. We will definitely be watching to see how those 7.5 million voters respond to having their democratic timeline manipulated.
Indeed. The price of this 3-year delay might turn out to be much, much higher than the cost of losing 4 elections.